To this webinar. We had a very nice meeting with Sister Rosemary Howarth in October here in Rome in the USG building. So thank you, Rosemary, for accepting our invitation again.
You're very welcome. I'm glad to be here.
We know that I'm Patrizia Morgante. I'm the communication officer of the USG, so I think most of you already know me. And for us, it's very important to strengthen and to strengthen this meeting online, because when we have meetings at the USG, we cannot include sisters coming from other countries. So to have a meeting online allows us to include and to reach sisters, superiors general, but also sisters from different countries. And we know that there are key issues that we all that are very important for all of us, and one of these one is formation, and the second one is interculturality. So we will have more meetings in 2018 on these issues. So just some technical information for you. All your micros are off, are mute. So if you want to talk, later we will have a time for question and answers. So just raise your hand and I will give you the floor. I will unmute your microphone. If you have any problem or I saw just already some people are writing here. You see, hi Sister Elizabeth, welcome. And she's Australian living in London. So welcome, Sister Elizabeth. Thank you for writing in the question box. So Sister Elizabeth already discovered the possibility to write questions or comments in the area question. So, and I will I can answer directly to you, or I can read the questions to Sister Rosemary later on. Okay? Thank you for participating, and now we want to start with a short prayer that I took this prayer from a meeting that we have just had in Manila. It was the meeting of the USG delegates from 5 to 10 of November, and the theme was building community in an intercultural world. So I decided to take a prayer from the initial ritual of this meeting because I think it's really profound. So my suggestion is that each of us can take a time of silence and read it by herself. Each of us, like everyone God created, is mystery, as the Word made flesh is mystery. I think that all of us who work on the formation field can touch the mystery of each person. So this is something that all of you, I don't think I have to spend too much words to introduce Sister Rosemary, because I learned that she's very known. So I just want to say that she's a sister of the School Sister of Notre Dame. She's living in Rome, and she's the Novice Director of an international congregational novitiate here in Rome of a congregation. So if she wants to say something more, she will share with us. And now I'm going to give you the possibility, Sister Rosemary, to share your screen. So you can start your presentation, then we will have a time for question and answers. So thank you, Sister Rosemary. Can you
see my screen now?
Yes. Yes, perfect.
Everything's okay.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, well, thank you for the invitation to experiment and to kind of live into the mystery of technology as well as the mystery of our God, working in the lives of all of us and in our women as well. Just want to see if I've got this all correct. Do you see my screen clearly? Patrizia? I'm going to presume that you see my screen, unless otherwise. First of all, I'd like to say thank you, because I feel like I'm talking to a group of women who have common interests and common concerns, not only because of the situation of our world and our church and each of our congregations, but because we are concerned about the call that God is giving to the women in the world today in our various congregations. And I also want to begin by giving a word of thanks to the Congregation for Religious, who recently published at the beginning of this year the New Wine in New Wineskins. The subtitle is The Consecrated Life and Its Ongoing Challenges Since Vatican II. I found it a very good read, and in particular, paragraphs 34 to 37 deal with formation. So I will make a couple of references to that. I think all of us that are listening in today, we're all interested in what are the approaches that really work in initial formation today. So I'm hoping that this time in the webinar I can share our experience as School Sisters of Notre Dame, what we've done as a new approach, and then to entertain what are your questions, my questions, what are insights that we discover together. Okay? So I've divided the presentation into two parts. Let's see if we can get this to work. What I'll do in the first section of time is give you a little bit of the history and motivation for why we're doing what we're doing as School Sisters, the kind of preparations that we needed to do, and because we've just begun our congregational novitiate, I can tell you about the first year, and our novices have now just moved into the second year. So it's very new for us. And then we'll take a break and see if there's any conversation we need to have or questions about the what we have done. And then the second part, I would like to talk about, so what have we found that's new? What have been the challenges for us? And some practical considerations. Because I know congregational novitiates is a growing trend in initial formation. Some people have tried it and have stopped doing it. Some have tried it and continue to do it. And others are really talking about what would this be like for us to have one congregational novitiate. And from the talk that I gave last month at UISG, I discovered that another option would be that a congregational novitiate could be an alternate to either, you could have a continental novitiate, plus if there are those who are just one in each of the countries, there could be an alternate novitiate for them. So there are many ways of looking at it. So let me just now spend some time to share what our experience is. And to give you the context of our experience, I'll give you a little bit of our history. Just that we are an international congregation, the School Sisters of Notre Dame. We were founded in 1833 in Bavaria, which means in 16 years from now, we'll be 200 years old. We serve in 30 countries, and we have one constitution in 11 different languages. So how and why did it come to be that we have a congregational novitiate? I'd like to do that with some numbers for you, and just to go back to 20 years, 1997, and our demographics at that time as a congregation, we were 5,000 sisters, and today we're 2,500. In 97, we were 21 provinces, and we had 2 cultural regions, and we also had 2 districts. And for us, districts were countries that were coming together and moving toward being a province. Now, we are 9 provinces. And that, as many of you would understand, we're such a large congregation, but with our numbers decreasing, that we've done very much reconfiguration in the last 20 years. And so we currently are 9 provinces. And in 97, we had 8 different novitiates. Already then, we had novitiates according to languages. We had a North American novitiate, we had a South American novitiate, one in Africa, one in Japan. We had a German-speaking novitiate here in Europe, plus Poland, Hungary, Czech. And now we have just one novitiate. What were some of the thinking that brought us to one novitiate? The General Council had concern for initial formation. This was an ongoing concern. And as it may be for some of your congregations, there were just 1 or maybe 2 people entering in some provinces, and there were larger groups in other provinces. But we were looking for a novitiate, a novice director, for 1 novice here, in the same dynamic in another country. And the important thing that we're beginning to realize, and we've heard it's also written in the new wine, in New Wineskins, in number 34, that formation is fundamental for the future of our consecrated life, and that continuous formation needs specific care. So our council took that seriously and thought, if we take good care at the very beginning, and then continue this continuous formation, we'll try that. We'll try with having 1 congregational novitiate. So there was much consultation with provincial councils, with provincial formation teams about having 1 novitiate. There was the appointment of a novice director. And one of the tasks that I took on already in 2014 was to review all the current provincial novitiate programs in light of looking at making 1 congregational novitiate program. And so we managed to pull together a draft of a proposed 2-year program. With that, we did many consultations with canon lawyers, with other congregations in Rome who already had or were interested in having a congregational novitiate. And that was a very profitable meeting back in 2014. I think we had 21 people come to that meeting, and that represented 13 congregations who were here in Rome at the time, interested in the topic. The other thing that was very helpful for us was that we had an international formation conference, again in 2014, with formators from each of the provinces and all the provincial leaders. And it brought everyone together to kind of stand in the same place and look through the same lens at what it would be like to have a congregational novitiate and what are the implications of that. We also called in the following year an international committee to look at the program that we had developed. And that was very beneficial for us. It helped us to look at it from different cultural perspectives and then continue to work on that program during 2015. Finally, when we thought we have at least a good draft of the program, it was reviewed by provincial councils and provincial formation teams. It was given the final approval by the General Council in December of 2015. And last year, we had the reception of our novices, our first novices in Rome on the 18th of September. So you can see by the preparation before we actually began this, there was a lot of investigation, a lot of research, and a lot of collaboration and coordination, a lot of prayer and work that went into the preparation. But it was well worth the while for us. So having done the preparation, let me just share very briefly what the window of experience was for us in actually living into this program. And the very first thing I want to say is that the novitiate and any kind of formation in our life, it's the work of our companion God. And I had a sense that as we lived into the program and even creating it, our God was with us. It was God's work, and we were trying to follow the light of the Spirit. And there were days when it was very cloudy and believed that God was in the cloud, and days that were very bright, like the fire on the journey of the Israelites, when we could actually see the presence of God at work in the midst of this. So the work of formation, to accompany, to stimulate, to challenge, to teach, to model, really that's the formator's job, but what really is going on is the work of God in the heart of each of our novices. So I simply acknowledge that. One of the first things that we did, we formed a community. This wasn't going to be a novitiate with just a novice director and an assistant novice director. We already knew that we wanted a community to model what it was like to live as School Sisters of Notre Dame. And so our community was intentional. It was intentionally multi-generational. So when we began, the youngest was 38, the oldest was 68. It was intentionally intercultural. So we had someone from Brazil, Canada, Ghana, and Poland. And the four of us lived together briefly and learned to live together ourselves before the arrival of the postulants. And so having said that, before the arrival of the postulants, you already know that they came, the novices that we have now, came as postulants. And I will explain that in a minute. When the postulants came to the novitiate building, and we happened to be here in Rome, at the back of our generalate, the General Superior welcomed them, and she said, I hope that in the novitiate you go deep and you go far. And some of the things that she meant by that is related to the purpose of the novitiate. That it's a privileged time and place to experience in a deeper way God's personal and unconditional love, and to discern God's personal call to each one. And therefore, we're not an ordinary apostolically active community, because novitiate needs to have its special time of solitude, prayer, study, and reflection, and a conscious effort to live a consecrated life in community, which in and of itself is very intercultural, since the 5 women that first came are from 5 different countries, and therefore 5 different cultures. But as we live together and discern together how God is calling each one, we're hoping that each of the women is enabled to make a life decision for a radical following of Jesus in the spirit of our founders. That's the purpose of novitiate. I would say it holds the same for each one of us in our congregations. So how did we arrange our timing? When I said that the postulants came as postulants, not as novices, that allowed us to have 7 weeks of transition in Rome. They got used to being out of their countries, learning a little bit about Rome, how to get around, just where we are here. And we also took time to look at who we are individually and collectively, as who we are as an intercultural faith community. And we did that through, we invited a couple of people to come and facilitate our community on intercultural living skills, which was very, very helpful near the beginning of that transition time. The 4 distinct phases then of the novitiate, we've just called them phase 1 to phase 4, but you can see there they have 10 canonical months here in Rome. And then there's 7 months of apostolic experience in their home province, in a local community, in ministry, living the theory that they've been learning about in that first phase 1. And that's where our novices are now. They're halfway through their 7 months of apostolic time, each in their own province, not necessarily in their own country, because several of our provinces are continental provinces. At the end of those 7 months, the novices will come back here for 4 months of integration and final discernment, whether they really feel called to our congregation to commit themselves to a radical following of Jesus in our spirit, according to our constitution, and then we'll write their letters of request for first profession. And the way we have planned it at this stage is, and in phase 4, they go back to their home province and they'll make first profession in their province. I need to say for us at this time, it's very important, the identity in the province, and have a strong sense of who they are. I just noticed as we came to the end of phase 1 working with the novices, they had such an international view of who we are. I needed to work hard at each of them identifying, so what are the issues, what are the questions, and what is the reality back in your home province as they prepared to go back to live in their own home province for those 7 months. And eventually will go back to their own province. So phase 1 really opened the window a little more deeply into SSND life and mission. It was important because this is the first time we have a common novitiate, as we had our different classes, that the congregation knew what we were doing. So we decided we'd send out 4 newsletters in the course of these 10 months, just to let the congregation know what was going on. So they shared their classes, their experiences, and both the novices and the sisters at large appreciated that. So we had a lot of classes in here, in the novitiate, but we also had the gift here in Rome. We discovered that there were 2 other English-speaking novitiates. I know there are Italian-speaking novitiates, but all our people speak English. So we attended inter-novitiate classes with the Ursuline Sisters of the Roman Union and also the Missionary Sisters of the Holy Spirit. And that was a great gift for all of us, that we planned things together and did things together. Things like charism, each presented their charism. We did the theology of religious life from a Dominican sister. We did emotions and the vows, and we did a course in Christology. So those are all inputs that were common for all of us, and then we each worked with our own constitutions in light of the information that we had as an inter-novitiate group. Another element that's very important is becoming a community of one mind and heart. So the 9 of us, representing 9 cultures, we worked hard as a prayerful community focused on Christ. And also having Augustinian roots, we had an Augustinian flavor to our formation as well. Promoting unity and oneness, learning the skills of communication, which I will make reference to in one of our challenges. But it really was a graced time as we worked at becoming a community of one mind and one heart, an important dimension in this phase 1, which is important for the rest of their lives as well. The individual accompaniment, which for me touches the heart of the novice and the heart of formation. In order to do that, we set up a weekly conference. I met with each novice each week, and it was like a window to their heart. Sometimes it was processing what they didn't understand maybe in class or in their reading, or dynamics that have happened in the community. But it was always with, and how is God leading you through this? It's that weekly conference that allowed me and the novice to really touch more deeply what God was doing in their life. Because the women who came, not all of them had English as their first language, we made the decision that spiritual direction would be with someone, a religious here in Rome, if possible, and we did manage that, that spoke their language. It was a good search, but it was a challenge to find, but it was really important that the novice could express herself in her own language and sort out some things at the deepest part of who she was in her own language. And then we could continue those conversations in our weekly conferences. Some things we did and some things we didn't. But for us, at this time, the individual accompaniment with me as the novice director, and also with regular spiritual direction, maybe every 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, that seemed to work for us. And a very important, critical point of it. Learning more about our history, our heritage, our spiritual heritage, our foundress, the book you see there, You Are Sent, is the name of our constitution. Again, the heart of the novitiate is allowing, permitting Jesus to become the center of their lives as novices. And I really discovered that each one entered fully and freely into the process of learning to live a radical following of Jesus as a school sister of Notre Dame. That's basically the what we did and why we did it. I'd like to stop at this point and just see if there are any questions or comments. What's your experience, commonality? So Patricia, if you could open us up.
That's right, yeah, just a little bit. Thank you very much, Rosemary. And while I will invite people to prepare the question, or, writing down in the question session, you also can raise your hand and I can give you the floor. I was thinking that, you know, it's true that reconfiguration for many provinces in the congregations is the main reason to set international novitiate. But it's also true that there is like a beauty of an intercultural and an international community. I don't know if I'm mistaken, but that's the experience that at the USG level we are trying to foster, because it's not just a need because we are less than before, but it's because you learn more in a multicultural community. So, okay. Do you have some questions or comment? I think it's important to interact a little bit because otherwise Rosemary thinks that we all agree with her and perhaps we are not.
Or just know what different experiences people have had.
Right. Okay, I have a question here. What was the role of the Assistant Novice Director during this time?
Okay. The role that our assistant director had, she is, the way the novices described it, and then I'll tell you what the job description was. When it came time for them to leave, the symbol that they gave to the assistant was, they called her an angel. She was always there. She was a support to them. The novices knew that the novice directors and the assistant and myself frequently talked about what the next part of the program would be. She gave some classes. She was working on her English as well, and so in this next phase, since she's away working on English now, she'll be giving a little more. But we worked the program together. But it was interesting, they knew that she was the assistant and I was the novice director. And it worked out fine. Our relationship was good, our planning together was very good. And she took care for me of a lot of the practical things. Because our novitiate is within the General 8 building, we have a lot of coordination with the General 8 community. So the assistant was the direct contact with the coordinator of the General 8. And so when we planned things together, when we did things separately, she also took care of things like repairs. A lot of the practical things, did a lot of the overseeing and the schedule planning of the things other than classes as well.
Thank you, Rosemary. I have another written question, but I still invite people to take the floor because, you know, the relationship is a little bit different, less cold. Sister Catherine asks, thank you for your presentation and sharing. I wish that you share whether you found difficulties when the novices went back to their provinces.
Okay. They are at the state there, as I said, they are halfway through being back in their provinces. I think the reality of going back to their own, for me, it seems like it takes about 3 months to really find their feet and their heart in a new place, because it's not they're in a formative community because the community has said yes to receiving a novice, but it's not the novitiate. And so my experience thus far is I think we need to work with the community as well as with the novice of what does it mean to have a novice in our community. So because this is our first year, or our first 2 years of this experience, we have not yet done an evaluation. I might have a whole lot more to say after I hear from the novices and hear from the communities and from the provincial councils in light of this experience. But I'd be interested to hear from others as well.
Thank you, Rosemary. Actually, Sister Catherine was completing her question saying, you know, rather the novices found difficulties back in their province. Again, please, the novices? The novices found the difficulties back in their province, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's both direction. There's another question from Suzanne. What is the role of the home community? Mm-hmm. Here in the novitiate, I presume that's what that is. Yeah. The novitiate community. We strive to live, to model our Constitution. What does it mean to live in community according to our Constitution? And so the two sisters, the other two sisters who work with the assistant and myself, they have a part-time job in the general aid, which puts a little realism into the community life. Not everybody is always available, which is very real. And basically, we try to model together this intercultural living in the spirit of our founders and according to our Constitution. When we have our what we call our local assemblies, our community meetings, that's with all of us. Our meals are with all of us. So it's not just the novices and the novice director and the assistant. There's a sense of a broader community living and sharing together. And so we have the insights. What does it mean to live? You are sent, our Constitution. So they hear it from 4 different perspectives rather than just 1 or 2 perspectives. So I find that the sisters in the community with us are very vital. They have a vital role to play. Thank you, Rosemary. I would like to ask Sister Susan to just raise her hand because she wrote a couple of questions and I think it's not clear perhaps. Yeah, thank you, Sister. You have the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. What I really meant was right now the novices are back where they came from, correct? And I was just curious about the kinds of things that they might be doing there. Perhaps are they working, involved? Just a little bit more about that was really what I was trying to find out. Okay. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
We're an educational congregation, and so each of them has gone back to their province according to the skills that they have. They're all working. It's what do I want to say? They're not being paid for it. They're doing volunteer work. Some of them are prepared for working in high school. So we have 1 in a high school. We have 2 others who are working with almost like nursery school and kindergarten age when they're used to working more with adults. So it's like developing the skills in the educational field, not only formal education, but education in on every level. So there's pastoral involvement, there's educational involvement that all of them are involved in. And so the purpose of this apostolic time is to now go ahead and live. You're not going to study, you're going to live in full-time ministry and live in community and see what it's like to really live this life. So there's lesser emphasis on learning academically and more through learning experientially what it means to live our Constitution. And so that the community where they are, they're also responsible for having deeper conversations in their assemblies about our Constitution, about the issues. We've just finished our general chapter, so there'll be all kinds of conversations about the documentation that came from our general chapter in their local communities. So it's they're living, they're trying to live as they will with vows.
Thank you, Rosemary. There's a written question and 2 raised hands. So I will give the floor to Sister Catherine. Sister Catherine? Kathleen, you can ask your question. Okay, she's not there. Anne?
Okay, Rosemary, you mentioned about the importance of working with the community back home when the novices go back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of our experience in Canada, where it's very often very difficult to find a community of people gathered together in one place because of our lifestyle of living in apartments or that type of thing, but forming community in a different way. So when you had the novices go back to their home communities, did you have to work hard to find a community that they could live back with?
Okay. First of all, I didn't have to find the community. It's the job or the responsibility of the provincial council to identify the communities where these novices would be sent. What we did prior to that is the novice and I wrote a bit of well, we had some conversations, and then we wrote a letter to the provincial council and said, these are some of the areas that the novice would like to work on in terms of her personal growth. These are some of the gifts and skills that she has in terms of ministry. And some of them just very, very generously said, I'm willing to go to whichever community you would like to send me. So that information was sent to the provincial council, and in our novitiate program, it's very clearly identified who's got what responsibility, and that's one of the major responsibilities of the provincial council, is to find the community. Now, the other reality with the 5 novices that we have, there wasn't anyone from a province where there were not sisters living under the same roof, like to find a local community where their sisters were living together. That was not a difficulty with this group.
Rosemary, I have some more questions, and they're all written. One is, what kind of daily timetable did the novices follow during the 10 months of the phase 1?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I could probably send you a paper with that. It's one of the questions that the sisters said, when you send us your newsletter, please tell us what the daily life is like. So we fit into the routine here at the General 8. We have Lauds and Eucharist in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, followed by breakfast. They had some personal time. We did contemplative sitting for 15 minutes before we came to class every day. And we had classes usually 3 to 4 times a week in the mornings. And so there would be input time, and then they'd have some personal reflection time and some group sharing back and forth like that. We'd have our noon meal. There was an hour. Now we're in Italy, so you know how important the siesta or the lunch break is. After pranzo, there's a pausa. So we only came back in the afternoons at 3 o'clock because lunch is at 1. So we'd have lunch, do the dishes, etc. And then in the afternoon, we'd either have class or they'd have personal study time. They'd go for spiritual direction. They'd do follow-up of things from classes. And then we worked in pairs to prepare supper. In the evenings, there was always one evening a week that was planned recreation. One evening a week we'd have a local assembly, our own community meeting. We did Lectio Divina on Fridays in the morning with the whole community rather than with having a class. So days were different depending on what was going on. If we had a guest speaker, then the days for a week or for a course, then the days were pretty well packed. And when we were just on our own and giving classes and input, then there was a little more time for personal reflection and study rather than class time. But the days, it was interesting, the days became pretty scheduled and pretty full. Of course, there's time for recreation and their own personal time. They evaluated that quite well. But there was a daily schedule.
Thank you, Rosemary. I have other questions, and I mean, I would like to invite the people who have written questions, if they want to just raise their hands, and I can give the floor. Sister Claire asked, in the past, it seems that it was difficult for women to adjust to a new culture, as well as to the culture of religious life and formation. Would you say that women today are more ready and willing to make this cultural shift?
The very first thing that I will say when I do the second half of this presentation is yes, they are much more ready. The novices said to me, that's part of the newness of this. The novices have said to me, you know, sister, it was not difficult for us to come to Rome. None of them are Italian. They've all come out of their countries. They said it wasn't difficult to come to Rome. One of the pieces of newness is that these are women of the 21st century. They've done travel, they've done exposure to different cultures, they've worked with different cultures. It's different living with them, that's true. We have our challenges with intercultural living. But adjusting to a new culture, maybe I could give, I'm going to hold back before I say more because I'll say what some of the challenges were. And a lot of them are cultural adjustments. Okay, so just hold on to that. And I'd like to talk about what was new and what were some of the challenges, and that might help some of the questions that are coming too.
Okay, let's conclude this first session, Rosemary, with the 3 questions that are still remaining. Okay. What I wish to ask is whether novices are accompanied by a particular sister back in the province.
The answer is yes. The community in which they live for these 7 months, there is what we've called a contact sister. She's the point of reference, and the novice is to initiate a meeting with that contact sister around every 3 weeks. If it happens more than that, that's fine, but there is an accountability on the part of the novice to meet with a contact sister. And the contact sister in the program, it's written up, this is her responsibility. She's not the novice directress, but she's someone who journeys with the novice for those 7 months. And we also ask the provincial council, either the provincial leader or someone from the council, to be in touch occasionally and to meet at least once in those 7 months directly with the novice while she's in her province. But the contact sister in the community is very important for the novices.
Right, thank you. Sister Mary asked, because it takes time to find your heart and fit in a new community, does moving 3 times and forming a reforming community give them enough time to ground themselves and discern commitment and vows?
Yeah, it's a very valid question. Very valid question, Sister Mary. And as I say, we're going to find out. One of my theories was, I had done work with novices for 11 years, many years ago, cross-culturally as well. And I found that it takes at least 6 months for people to really kind of come to themselves and feel grounded. So that's why it was like that whole first year, it's almost a full year here. They got grounded and then they found themselves. And that's why it's a 7-month stint at home, to really get into a feel for it, so that coming back, and it is a 3rd move, I acknowledge that, but they're coming back to something that they know and people that they know. and hopefully it doesn't take them as long to come back home to themselves in that last kind of final discernment time, so that when they go back home in phase 4, they really have a sense of, this is really what I want. I feel at home within myself, within the community, and here I am, God, take me. But we will find out. And each one is on an individual journey within herself. And so I'm saying theoretically, that's what we're doing. What happens and how each one journeys, that's God's work with the woman. And so we'll find out. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Rosemary. It seems that you are still learning, you know, in this role. So there's another question. Which are the 5 nationalities the 5 novices came from?
Okay, that's a good one. We have Japanese, Brazilian, Ghanaian, German, Nigerian.
Thank you. Just I want to try to give the floor to Sister T. Lee.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes. Hi, Sister Rosemary.
Hello.
I really appreciate the fact that you really took time in preparing for to establish this novitiate. I'm interested in knowing how the community of the sisters was come about, because of forming a formative community for the novitiate is very important. So how is it? Is it the appointment from the leaders, or from some say from the director, or both? Can you share with us about that? Yeah.
Sister, sorry, where do you come from?
I come from Vietnam.
Okay, thank you.
Currently I'm in Rome.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Because this was the very beginning of planning this program, in consultation with the General Council and myself, we sat around and thought about who has experience in formation on some level, who is close in age to the women. And so the one sister that's 38, she had just made her final vows. And for me, that was very important. She was a good, I think they're all good women, but she's someone who we felt could handle coming into a more formative time, just having made final vows. And she's a great asset to that. And someone who's older, who has the wisdom of life experience. So we negotiated, I didn't, but the General Superior did, negotiated with the provincials of these sisters and asked them, invited them, and they were asked if they would come, and every one of them generously and joyfully said, yes, I'd like to do it. So that's how it came to be.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry, Rosemary, do you want to continue?
They've given a commitment of 3 years. So we'll see. So far, we're all still here, the 4 of us.
Thank you very much. I think you can continue your presentation, then we will stop again to have some reactions. Thank you, Rosemary.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, let me move this. So, the window of newness. As I was saying, part of the newness is the times that we live in. This is not the same world that most of us entered into. How many of us were around the Vatican II time or shortly after that? It was also another century. So we have another whole world out there that is very familiar to the women today that was not so familiar to us in our time. The complexity of the world, the problems of the world, but also the gifts of the world. And I'm going to name technology as one of the gifts. And the global awareness, because of the media that we have today. part of the newness is the women that are coming. They're women of the 21st century, let me put it that way. And they're living in a world, in a church that has moved into the 21st century, that for a lot of our sisters, it may be difficult to even imagine having a common novitiate. And they have a whole different worldview than when we entered. So do our programs reflect the fact that part of the newness is this is a new time and these are women in the 21st century? So having said that, the other part of newness is that three of the 5 novices that we had, 3 of them would have made their novitiate alone in their countries if we didn't have a novitiate here. And they say this sense of belonging to a peer group is very important to them. Now, this is the novices speaking. In theory, that's what I believed, but they have confirmed that for me. They also have a deep sense of belonging to the international congregation. We come out of a history of having a very strong provincial identity, a sense of belonging to the province, to a province, which is very fine and it's good and it's necessary. But for myself, it took me going to a general chapter in 1987 for me to really have a felt sense of what it meant to belong to the international congregation. These women are starting having a felt sense of belonging to an international congregation, and they have a group, a peer group, who challenges and also gifts. So that deep sense of belonging is new for those who would have been alone, and for having a congregation, a sense of the international congregation. For us being in Rome, and that was a conscious choice about where the novitiate would be, the novices have a heightened sense of the universal church. They all come from parishes, so they have a sense of the parish life. But being here in Rome for us, and being an international congregation, there's a heightened sense of the universal church. And it allows us to do little mini pilgrimages to some of the places here in Rome that touch the history, that like the faith foundation of our church, which have been gifts that they wouldn't have had if they were not here. We've also had the richness of the diversity of the speakers, of the presenters that have been able to come here. We have some sisters who've really done in-depth studies of the letters of our founders, and she could come and give great insights and great presentations to the novices about that. We have sisters who worked on the writing of our Constitution. So the novices came to a greater appreciation of how we came to have our document, You Are Sent. The other thing that is new, and I want to say it's the positive use of technology. We've had presentations by our sisters on different topics through Skype. One of the activities that the novices really enjoyed was each one chose 3 sisters. When we were studying the vows, they made up questions. What is it like to live the vows? They had about 15 different questions. And they could interview 3 different sisters via Skype, whether they were in their province or in some other province, other people that they've met by being here. They did interviews of our sisters. And then they also interviewed someone here in the house, and we have an intercultural group here that lives and works in the General Lake. So the positive use of technology, they're used to using technology. I was so concerned in planning the program, how am I going to deal with the use of internet, the use of all this technology of today? We haven't found a problem. It's like, find the way to make adult choices using what's available for us as women religious. So those were some of the positive aspects of technology and the richness and the diversity of presentations that they've been able to have from our sisters all over the world, really. So let me move to some practical challenges, and some of you have already made reference to some of those, and they're very real, and so let's just name some of them. I have something else here on my screen that I don't want to have. Okay. Come on. First thing was the stomach. Not everyone could adjust to a Mediterranean cuisine. So this is part of interculturality. We learned what we could eat and how we could have our needs met in terms of food. Language is also a challenge. We know that there needs to be a certain level of English because our novitiate here in Rome is done in English, and we did not ask that people study Italian because some of them were working on English, and so we can't have two things going on at the same time. And so the level of English that needs to be worked at before they're accepted for coming to the novitiate, that's an obvious one. Ministry opportunities. Now, I had planned in our program that they would have like a half day each week to be in ministry in service to the poor here in Rome. Well, after much study and walking around and talking, without having Italian, it was almost impossible. However, I went to USMI, the Union of Major Superiors for Italy, and they have a program called Slaves No More, and Sister Monica Chikwe, and anyway, she gave us different sessions on the reality of trafficking, the trafficking especially of women here in Rome, here in Italy. And then we were allowed to accompany the group of sisters who goes to Ponte Galleria, which is like a holding center, a deportation center for women out near the airport. And every Saturday there's a pastoral visit that's done by a variety of sisters, a variety of congregations on Saturdays. And we were allowed to have two of the novices go on the Saturdays to accompany the sisters and be pastorally present to the women there. So I know that we will have a larger number of novices next year coming to the novitiate here. Ministry opportunities is a challenge for us here. Bridging our cultural and linguistic diversity, it touches on everything. It touches the kind of recreation we have, so you can see we did dancing. We did a lot of spontaneous recreation things that brought a lot of laughter, and sometimes we don't need a lot of words with what we do, but a lot of actions, and it just brought a lot of good creativity. And we found the games that didn't need a lot of language so that people could just enjoy and relax. So recreation was a big thing for crossing boundaries culturally, and also getting into other people's cultural fun things. Like we learned a little bit of origami from our novice from Japan. So it's building on the gifts that each has. But another aspect of bridging this cultural diversity is in celebrating major feasts. And not just the major feasts, just the ordinary day praying. But what is meaningful in one culture to celebrate their birthday, their country's national holiday? What does it mean to decorate appropriately in an appealing way, whether it's in the chapel, whether it's when we invite people for dinner at our place, or whether it's just planning prayer so that it can be done prayerfully and meaningfully in such an intercultural and multilingual group. So the stretch is there. It's a challenge, but it's not impossible. And when we work together and join together, it's fine. So let me just add, excuse me, I get my papers here. As we look to the future, it's not just looking at the novitiate. So I'd like to say some practical considerations for any of you that are thinking about having a congregational novitiate, but also considerations for your congregation, which is what we're dealing with. What would be the motivation for having a congregational novitiate? To have that really clear for yourselves. And as you saw, it took us a good couple of years of preparation till we really got settled in why are we doing this and how are we going to do this? And where is the novitiate going to be? Just so that it's not incorporated, a congregational novitiate, if it's congregational, it's not provincial. And it's hard to find the place, where's the best place? I thought logistically, the best place for our congregational novitiate to be would have been in Africa, where our novitiate was there because we had a building big enough, we were well established there, this would be great, and it's inserted with the people. But the reality is we'd probably be influenced by what goes on in the province of Africa, and so the decision was made that it would be here in Rome. In the end, for us, it's right. It's good. We're part of the General Aid community, or the building where the General Aid is housed. But it also gives the opportunity for the novices to meet the different people of the congregation as they come in for international meetings. So, however it is, really consider where the best location is for your novitiate. This is a big one, the implications in the pre and post novitiate programs. I like to use the expression of having like a seamless garment to develop a culture of permanent formation, of continuous formation. And so to build on what needs to be done in the postulancy in order for the women to be prepared to come to the novitiate. And there's a common preparedness, if I can call it that way. For example, our postulant directors were working on common elements, no matter what province you were in. They were already working on common elements for their postulancy program. And what are the elements for a post-novitiate program now that they've had a novitiate that's congregational? What is it going to look like for the temporary professed time? And so the temporary professed directors are working on their pieces. The postulant directors are working on their pieces. I would say having a good emphasis on human development and self-knowledge, as well as their own faith development and prayer, are just basic for the postulancy, just basic. And then they're ready. You'll know if they're ready. And so this criteria for readiness for the novitiate is something that all the provincial leaders and the formation teams worked on, so that everybody knows if this is the criteria, then we think they're ready to move to novitiate. Because it is a big move. But are they ready? Another consideration is to be really clear on the clarification of roles and responsibilities and accountability. I'm accountable to the General Superior for me and for the program, but I'm accountable to the provincial of the novices that I have. And then in our handbook, everything is written up on, this is what your responsibility is, this is what your role is, and to whom you're accountable. Whatever language you have your novitiate in, that there be sufficient time to study the language. before they're accepted to the novitiate. And then to decide where the location of first profession will be. We have decided in writing up the program it would be back in their province. The novices already have said, no, we want to do it together. So you can imagine a little bit of interaction that we've had. So we need to visit that. In light of our experience, we need to say, is this the best place for first profession? Three considerations for the congregation. We all need to be working on intercultural living skills. Given the world reality, given who we work with, the parishes, the places where we live, the migration of peoples, the state of affairs of refugees, we all need to be working on our intercultural living skills. We also need to have ongoing formation. Number 35 in this New Wineskins really highlights that. Developing a culture of permanent formation. It's not just the novices or postulants that are in formation. We all are. And another consideration is the formation of our formators. I think it says in number 37 in the same document, New Wine, that's a multicultural context or multicultural experiences for our formators as they receive women from different cultures. It heightens their sensitivity of what the novices are going through, or the postulants maybe. And the importance of collaboration between leadership and formators, so that you feel like you're moving together for ongoing formation, this permanent culture, or culture of permanent formation. Some of these things we haven't thought about before, and they're really so in the fore now that we cannot not pay attention to them. But even as we work in formation and know that it's really God's work, then I think as we move into the future, we need to be contemplative enough to hear what God is asking. And then we have to be courageous and creative and faith-filled enough to do whatever God is asking of us for the building up of the reign of God for our time. Truly, if new members are like new wine, and then I wonder, how do we make the wineskins fresh so that we'll all be carried into the future? I've shared with you just one approach in initial formation. Number 22 in the book New Wine and New Wineskins, the substitution of wineskins, as Jesus spoke of it in the gospel, does not just happen. It requires effort, skill, and a willingness to change. It's about authentic renewal as we move into the future. So, I hope I answered some of the questions maybe that you had in terms of the challenges. What's new? Are there some other questions at this point?
Thank you very much, Rosemary. It was very inspiring, your sharing, and I mean, I'm a lay woman, so I was really struck from your reflection about, how we as women are now, today, are more ready to be, to be open to the diversity. So this is very interesting, perhaps also for us as lay people, And I found that the three considerations for congregations are really the UISG preoccupations for next year in the field of formation. So we are planning to have a program in both interculturality and formation for formators. So this is really two challenges that are that touch all of us. So thank you again. Thank you very much. And yes, we have some questions. I have some written questions that I'm going to read to you, and I also invite participants to raise their hand and to talk directly. I want to try just to give the floor to Sister Barbara Brown Graham, because she was writing to me by email that she's not able to raise her hand. So I will try to give the floor. Sister Barbara?
Hello, Patricia. Yes, I've just found out how I find the toolbar. So don't worry, I'm here and I can ask the question if I need to.
Okay, thank
for
you.
anybody else, just to say to you, enlarge your screen to full screen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia.
The details that we have to learn. Thank you. So I will read the three questions that I have right here. One from Sister Elizabeth. How do the home communities prepare to receive the novices during their apostolic experiences? I have heard many fearful voices, and some do not feel they are able to accompany a novice.
It's very clear in our program what's written for the responsibility of the home community, the receiving community. It's the responsibility at this stage of someone from the provincial council or someone that they would delegate to prepare the community. And basically, it's a willingness to be with a potential sister. The contact sister, there needs to be one sister in the community who's prepared to take on that role a little more. But that it be a welcoming, real, living community. And you're right, not everybody wants to do it. So how we work with them culturally, this is where I think provincial councils need to be in touch with what their sisters need. We'll do any kind of written preparation and suggestions, etc., which is what we have done thus far. But basically, the preparation needs to be done at the provincial level by leadership.
Thank you, Rosemary. There's another question from Sister Ann. Do you anticipate the novices for 2018, 2019?
Yes. In the congregation right now, we have 17 postulants across the congregation, and by the end of March, we'll know how many will be accepted for the novitiate. And we only take them every 2 years because it's a 2-year program. So it'll be for the 2018 to 2020 group. So we're looking at a group that could be 2 or 3 times, well, closer to 3 times bigger than what we have right now. And we're looking at having another person come on staff as well.
I want to give the floor to Sister Mary. Sister Mary?
Yes. I thank you very much, Rosemary, for your presentation. It was very clear. I have worked in an international novitiate for 5 years. I'm now in Brazil. We've had one for maybe 8 years now. One of the things that you didn't mention, but that is wonderful for us as a international congregation, is we get to know each other from different countries, so that it brings the congregation together. We have 21 novices at the moment, but they continue, because of technology, they continue their sharing, their conversations. And so in terms of community meetings and gatherings, and we really begin to know each other as a congregation. And I think that's one of the marvelous things of having an international novitiate, besides the fact of really learning and putting your feet and heart into intercultural living, which is always a challenge. The way people think, the way they process, there's just so much to that. And so thank you for your presentation.
And thank you for that too. It's really true that they're beginning to know each other, and we know them, but they're going to probably have a final vow program together, their tertian program together. They're going to stay together. Yes.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Thank you, Sister Mary. I have just another question from Sister Ann. Do you also have to deal with members of the congregation who might be thinking along the lines that we should not be accepting new members?
It hasn't come to me, no. I know some people, I know theoretically that some people have said, no, we shouldn't take any more because we're getting old, etc., etc. But we've just finished our general chapter, and we are not dying. We're getting smaller, but we are not dying. So I haven't had to deal with that. I sit in Rome, Anne.
Thank you, Rosemary. We have to continue to give birth to life, you know. Thank you for your questions. There's another question. Thank you for the sharing my question. How did you help the novices on the positive use of technology like smartphones?
I didn't have a problem with the group that I had here. The smartphone came in most handy when she needed to use it for translation. You know, if you're following in English, but if there's a word you don't catch, if you can do a quick catch, you know, what does that word mean? And then she's back on board again. We had some guidelines for communication with family and friends during this time, which was limited, but I did not have a problem, so I haven't had to deal with it. We didn't ask people to bring them, and we didn't say don't bring them. So we said, let's teach how, through experience, what's helpful for you, what's not helpful for you, make some adult decisions and learn from your experience.
Thank you, Rosemary, for this reflection, because, you know, I'm very touched by this kind of question because I'm dealing with communication, and I know that this is a theme in many congregations. So actually, I want just to share the answer that the Sister Rosen Paul gave to me months ago, saying we have to use technology as part of the formation, and we have to train ourselves in the use of technology because they are part of our life nowadays. Digital world is part of our life, and we are part of the digital world. So this is a challenge, but we have to learn how to inhabit, not excluding the ICT, but including them as part of the formation. So this is just my personal. Thank you very much again, and I mean, we have some minutes more if you want to ask some other question or just to say something. Yes, I have another person. Oh, sorry, Rosemary, yeah.
No, I just have one, before we would end, I have one more picture that I'd just like to show and comment on.
Okay.
At the end.
I have just one other question or reflection. Sister Catherine. Sister Catherine.
Hello, Rosemary. I just wanted to ask you about what you've just said there, the limited communication with friends and family. I'd love if you could talk a little bit more about what that looked like.
We asked the novices before they came here to talk with their families, saying, this is a time that's apart. I won't have regular contact with you. What I said to them is, if there's a family emergency or something, that's the exception, right? But we had said, if you know the program WhatsApp on your phones, WhatsApp. How am I going to explain this? It's like a mini Skype, and it's the way most of our sisters in Africa and a lot in South America communicate, because they haven't got wide broadbands for things like email. So I said, once a month, just touch in with somebody in your family if you need to, if you want to. And that's what they've done. And it was that simple. And we asked that you sign off of Facebook for while you're in the novitiate. Now that was hard because so much is Facebook. But I said, what's going on in your heart and in your community here, it's for you and your God and for us here. It's not for public knowledge. And the other thing we said was, in terms of pictures, we're very sensitive of not putting pictures of the novices on our website, on our congregational website. These women are in discernment and they have a right to that privacy. So we put up some solid guidelines and they seem to have been okay. But I'll know when we do the evaluation at the end of the 2 years if it really was too much or too little.
Thank you, Sister Rosemary, again. And you have a big fan within your congregation, Sister Mary Kay. She says, thank you, Rosemary. Your presentation was fantastic. I'm very proud to be an SSND sister. So you have a fan within. This is important because we are not prophet in our own house. So. Okay, just perhaps Sister Barbara would like to say something.
Rosemary, yes. If a novice, if it is decided and discerned that a novice needs to go home, where does this come from? From you, from the provincial, or what?
Okay. My role is to make recommendations. The decision-making is with the provincial leaders. So it could come if while they're at home in these 7 months, if something's happening in the community there and provincial leader is informed and part of it, and it really seems like she should go, like the discernment would probably be in connection, in communication with me, but the decision would be with the provincial and her council. I could, if something was happening there or here when they're in the canonical time here, I would express my serious concerns that a discernment would be made and involve the provincial in that, because in our congregation it's the provincial leadership or the provincial with the consent of her council that makes those kind of decisions for acceptance or asking them to leave. And we have a whole process again in our novitiate program of what that would look like step by step. Does that answer your question, Barbara?
Oh, sorry. Barbara?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I don't know if I don't see any other requests or questions, so we can go towards the conclusion, but it's not the conclusion actually, because we will meet more in the future.
If I could just use this picture of Sister Doris Klein to finish off. It doesn't have anything to do with wine or wineskins. It has everything to do with what she has called it, the midwives, witnessing transition. This invitation to look at new approaches for formation, as I pondered this picture, it's not that there's a rupture, but there's a definite break. But if you can see, I don't know, I hope you can see that there are the lines, they're like lifelines, they're like umbilical cords, they're like the charism flowing between the women, our ancestors, the women who have gone before us, the women who are coming, those of us who are still here. There is a sense of we're still connected and we're moving. And the other reality is we've been witnessing transition, not only in formation, but in all of our history. As women religious, or in religious life in general, we have a history of continual adaptation to new worlds, to new times, new thinking, new acting, new structures, new ways of being, women religious in our church and world today. There is new life. And God is gifting us with new wine. We need to have the fresh skins to hold that new wine. And we've done it for centuries. So I just want to end on a note of hope. we struggle to know what's best for each time that we live in. So I just pray as I look at the land of Cana in Galilee. If you can see this prayer, let's just pray it together. Holy Mary, woman of the new wine, guard the desire in us to go forward in obedience to the newness of the Spirit, recognizing the sign of her presence in the new wine, fruit of harvest and new seasons. Let's pray for each other. We're in solidarity, in ongoing formation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosemary. The conclusion was very inspiring and touching. Thank you. I think this is the right way to close our meeting, our webinar. I will just come up. Okay, I will try to recuperate the. I'm trying to. Yeah. Okay.
Here you are.
Here we are again. Thank you very much. It was very good, very inspiring, and I just want to tell participants that we are going to share the recorded video with you, and also the presentation in PowerPoint that Rosemary showed to you. So we will share all this material that you can share also with your congregations and sisters. Just two words about the next meeting. We have planned 5 webinars about communication. So the title is The Umbrella is Communicating the Mission, and the first one will be next Monday at 3 p.m. and it's still possible to register. I just want to repeat again that we are going to have meetings at the USG building, but also online on the key issues that are coming up in the congregation. So interculturality, anti-trafficking, communication for religious, formation for sisters, mission with migrants, canon law, child protection, Catholic schools. These are just a few of the main topics for the next meetings and webinars. So thank you again to all the participants for your patience and your participation. Thank you again, Sister Rosemary.
You're welcome.
Meet again.
You're welcome.
And we will meet soon again. So in a few days you will find the video on the website and I will send it to you. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon or morning for the people who still have the day ahead. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you too, Patricia.